I'm Michael Santos with Prison Professor, and today I have the opportunity to introduce you to my friend George Manlove. George is facing some challenging times, but that wasn't always the case. He started off with a really extraordinary career before he ever had to ask questions at all about the criminal justice system. George, tell us a little bit about how you began your career.
Well, I began my professional career right out of graduate school at the University of Washington. I was an intern for the Apple computer manufacturer's representative and loved it. Had a great time. My wife and I went to school at UW, and my wife's father was an entrepreneur and owned a business in Montana. One weekend he came out, and after serious discussions, he asked me to join the company. And it was a family business, a very small family business, and they were facing some troubled times, and felt I could help them.
When you say a small family business, what were the annual revenues and how many employees were part of that business when you started?
Well, the annual revenues, if my memory serves me, were in the $1 million to $1.5 million in annual sales. And
about a 1.1 to 1.5 million in annual sales, and how many employees?
Approximately 15.
15 employees. And you were with that company for how long?
28 years.
In 28 years, what was the height of the annual revenues, and how many employees did it grow into under your leadership?
The peak of our annual revenue was in approximately 2007. And that was $147 million. At that time, we had about approximately 320 employees.
So you are the epitome of the establishment, the type of individual that nobody would have thought would ever set foot into the criminal justice system. But unfortunately, for some reason, the criminal justice system has been hanging over your head as a dark cloud for how long?
At least 6 years.
At least 6 years. And tell us a little bit about how you first became aware that you could possibly be enmeshed in any type of, whether it was a civil action or a criminal action. What was the process that began for you?
Well, I discovered early on that there had been some complaints by our employees to the Department of Labor that for a variety of reasons, none of which were legitimate. And I didn't think much of that. And then back in 2012, our company had faced a Great Recession, and business had fallen off approximately 50%, which really put us in a compromising position. So I left the organization and hired a turnaround expert, and he subsequently filed bankruptcy in 2012. That's when things really started getting heated up.
But at that time, there was no indication that a court of law was asking you for subpoenas or records or depositions or anything along those lines. At that time, it was still simply internal business decisions. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so what was the first indication that some outside authority may be interested in you?
It was approximately 8 months after the bankruptcy that was filed in August of 2012.
And on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you say you would have been on that scale to understand the implications or the potential downfalls or upside or options that you may have had at that earliest stage of the process?
I had no idea. I suspected there might be a civil case because we had equity holders. And when in bankruptcy, the equity holders obviously get nothing in theory. That wasn't the case in this situation. But I discovered it approximately 8 months thereafter when I received a subpoena from the Department of Labor in, I guess, fall or spring of 2013.
So one of the reasons that I ask that question is that I think a lot of times people become aware that there's a potential for them to become a target of some type of an inquiry, but they don't recognize how every decision is going to influence what happens going forward, which is why I think it's so important to listen and learn from stories like yours. You were a CEO of a large company. You had a depth and breadth of experience in building a great retail establishment, and certainly were skilled to lead as a general of a big organization like that. But when it comes to navigating the criminal justice system, it's like you're in uncharted territory. And by being in uncharted territory, sometimes we make decisions that make things not easier for us, but harder for us. Can you tell us about some experiences that you've had over these past several years that in retrospect you would have liked to have done something differently?
Absolutely. Well, once the civil case was settled out of court, about 6 months later, there was rumors and actually published in the local newspaper that the FBI had opened a investigation for criminal wrongdoings in the case. And I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea why would the FBI be investigating a bankruptcy? That was really the most surprising thing to me. And
well, one of the things about that, George, is there are a lot of times that law-abiding citizens, business owners get involved in a bankruptcy, and they can find themselves in the crosshair of prosecutors if they knowingly and intentionally lied on a form. For example, maybe they didn't want to disclose an asset that they had that they expected to sell later. And I met people in prison who are serving time for that very reason. In your case, it was far more complicated. That there was no effort for self-enrichment, no effort to hide assets. You just found yourself in the crosshairs of the government, and you didn't know how to respond.
Oh, no question. As a matter of fact, I never talked to anybody from the government until my trial this last February in 2017. That was the first time I had a chance to even discuss my case in the opening or my position on the situation. Everything was done behind the scenes with the government.
And where were you turning for advice when you knew that you were going into uncharted waters? You didn't know anything about what was to come. Where did you go to find information about what would be the best course of action to take?
Well, obviously, I had a relationship with several attorneys. However, what I discovered is the attorney for our civil case did not understand criminal law, and what became the attorney for the criminal case didn't understand civil law. So that was my only source of information was hired professionals, in particular attorneys. And so that's where I went originally.
How valuable do you think it would have been to you at that time to be listening and learning from other CEOs who had gone through similar missteps and that put themselves in danger and their families in danger and their livelihoods in danger and the assets they've accumulated over decades of work in danger? What level of comfort would you have gotten by turning to a peer group of other CEOs that have faced challenges with the criminal justice system?
That would be invaluable. I wouldn't be here today, at least in the situation that I'm in right now, being ready to surrender.
That's one of the areas that I'm so grateful that we've had an opportunity to meet and talk about, because just as at that early stage of the journey, had you had access to others with experience who have gone through it and may have been able to coach you or guide you into at least considering different options that you could have pursued, at least perhaps educated you with some of the downfalls that they experienced, so that you could become a more informed participant in collaborating with your defense attorneys and your civil attorneys, so that you could perhaps navigate the best possible outcome. A lot of time that's hard to do when you don't know what's coming. I've met so many people in your shoes that they describe the situation as if they're a marionette, a puppet with somebody else pulling the strings. And, one day they're going this way, but the reality is you built a very successful career in retail from making good decisions based on what you've observed in the marketplace. and strategizing